Welcome to How I Made It Through. I wanted to welcome our guest, Mark Anthony, JD, the Psychic Explorer. I'm so grateful for him to be here. And I want to share a little bit about Mark before we get started. Mark Anthony, JD Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lawyer, is a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He's an Oxford-educated attorney, licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Mark was named a notable graduate of the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science. He is a Spiritual Awakening International Circle of Honor honoree, and he received the OME Award for Best Psychic Medium. Mark appears nationally on TV and radio, including CBS TV, the Dr. Gaia TV, and the Discovery Channel. He co-hosts the live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc, on the Transformational Network. The Psychic Explorer travels to mystic locations in remote corners of the world to examine ancient mysteries and supernatural phenomena. He's a featured speaker at conferences, expos, and universities, which include Brown, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale. Mark is the author of 3 best-selling books. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, has won multiple awards, ranked as one of the top books about faith, and was up for a Pulitzer. His other best-selling books are Never Letting Go and The Evidence of Eternity. He is also a VIP executive contributor for the Best Holistic Life magazine. Please welcome Mark Anthony.
Thank you so much. It's really great being here. I always enjoy working with you, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in as well, because your work and your story is really fascinating. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Yeah. Mark, I'm so excited to be here with you today because there's a lot about what is important to you that is also important to me and to people that I work with. And I, in particular, it is this idea that we all can connect to the other side. And I'm fascinated as I read your book, The Afterlife Frequency. It really resonates with me. And I would love to know a little bit about what made you to decide that you wanted to start that you wanted to write that book.
Writing that book began with my first book. My first book, Never Letting Go, is a guide on the journey through grief. And I wrote it for people who, it's when the shock of the death hits you, it's that horrible feeling where your life is falling apart. And I know you know that, and I know that, and I would venture to say the vast majority of the audience watching knows that. And it was when I was on the Never Letting Go tour that people started asking me very poignant questions about, is there a soul? Is there scientific proof for this? Does hell exist? What happens with suicide? Do animals have souls? Is reincarnation real? So I started keeping a list of those questions, and I wrote my second book, Evidence of Eternity. And I started explaining scientific basis for spirit contact and the existence of the soul and reincarnation. And Evidence of Eternity was received so well, people started contacting me saying, we want more science. So I wrote The Afterlife Frequency to introduce concepts to explain the existence of the soul, the afterlife, near-death experiences, deathbed visions, out-of-body experiences, reincarnation, because, Bernadette, none of this is hocus pocus. All of this is real, and it's based on sound scientific principles. And the really fascinating thing about the time that we live in is that we have the benefit of quantum physics and advanced neuroscience, and we're now beginning to quantify and to identify the existence of the soul. In other words, survival of consciousness in near-death experience studies. And both of us are going to be speaking at the IANS International Association for Near-Death Studies at the end of August in Chicago. So it's great to have a fellow IANS speaker here with me.
Yeah. It is, it's fascinating. The two of us grew up with similar Catholic background.
Yes.
And, our Catholic backgrounds, we were taught that the way to connect with spirit was through prayer, and that
Yeah.
it was a one-way street, and that there was no, that when our loved ones passed away, it was to rest in peace and to not be disturbed. That was kind of the vision that we were given for that's what the afterlife is. And now that this awakening is happening, and just even in your book alone, there's so much information to help people to begin to understand that we need to talk about death and that it is not the end. And even for those of us who were brought up in the Catholic religion and other religions, that there is room now to learn more.
It was really interesting for me because I was about 3.5 when I first started perceiving spirits. And both of my parents had these abilities as well. My dad was a Navy SEAL who had become an aerospace engineer, and my mom was a commercial illustrator. And they did not go public with their abilities. I mean, mom would talk about it, and people in the neighborhood knew about my family, but my dad especially was a real no nonsense kind of guy. And then here I am about at 4. Then I have my NDE, which I go into detail about in the Afterlife Frequency. But at the ripe old age of 5, I started Catholic school. And I remember my dad saying to me, "Don't talk about any of these things except your mother and me." He said, "You can tell us anything, but don't talk about it." And so there I am sitting in religion class in Catholic school, and they're talking about angels and saints and all these visions of saints. But then I started hearing the other things they were saying, and I kind of realized, yeah, Dad was right. Plus, he didn't want me being bullied or victimized for being, a weird kid. When you're a little kid that sees
Mhm.
spirits and communicates with the other side, that can really cause a lot of problems. I mean, it's hard enough
Mhm.
growing up. It's hard enough being a kid. It's hard enough being a teenager without something that bizarre thrown into the mix of it. So, but so many religions, the various Christian religions, they close the book of Revelations. That's it. God doesn't talk to anybody. But then in the
Mhm.
Catholic faith, you have all the saints. You have like Saint Bernadette. Okay. Saint Bernadette at Lourdes was seeing a vision of who she called the Lady of Light. And what's really fascinating about that Bernadette is Bernadette Subaru, for those who are not familiar with Our Lady of Lourdes in the story of Bernadette. She was a young French girl, young teenage girl, and in Lourdes, France, near a grotto, a kind of a cave, she kept seeing images of this lady in light. And the Catholic Church did an investigation, and they concluded she was seeing the Virgin Mary. The fascinating thing is, Bernadette never said, "I'm seeing Mary, the mother of Jesus." The Catholic Church put that spin on it. And,
Mhm.
I'm sure they had their reasons why. And Bernadette it was instructed by the Lady Light to dig, and then a spring came forth, and this supposedly is holy water. And according to everything I've read, there have been a number of miraculous healings by people immersing themselves in the water. And the water has been analyzed by chemists, and it's high in mineral content, but they can't find anything unusual about it. And I'm also not saying that everybody that goes and drinks the water or immerses themselves in it is cured, but there have been a number of unexplained healings from this water over the past, now I guess about close to a century and a half. So I'm going to Catholic school, and I keep hearing stories about these people like St. Francis of Assisi, who would
Mhm.
pray to God and develop stigmata, bleeding from his
Mhm.
hands and side and feet, and the wounds on his head for the crowns of thorns, mimicking the wounds of Jesus. Other saints like St. Anthony of Padua, lecturing in languages he didn't even know. St. Clare of Assisi, interestingly enough, a close associate of both St. Francis of Assisi and St. Anthony of Padua. She was a very pious nun, And in later life, she became too ill to leave the convent. So she had to stay in her room, but she would pray to God for her to be able to see what was happening in Mass in church. And she could see it in real time. Here's the cool part. So the Pope, cardinals of the Catholic Church, European kings, and even the Holy Roman Emperor, which was from Germany, would all come to meet with St. Clare for her piety and her wisdom. But she was seeing events in real time that were happening beyond her five physical senses. So 800 years after her death, in 1958, Pope Pius XII declares her the patron saint of television. And so, because she was receiving visions projected to her from afar. Now, let's find out what really is going on here. The Vatican, in other words, the Catholic Church, is very well aware of psychic phenomenon because most of the popular saints exhibited what we now would call psychic and mediumistic ability. St. Clare was what is known as a remote viewer. And a remote viewer is someone who can take their consciousness and project it either across the street or even around the world, see things happening in real time. And you can say, oh, that's a bunch of hocus pocus, except for the fact that the CIA, the British, French, Chinese, North Korean, Russian, Australian, and Japanese secret services have been using remote viewers for decades. So before we shoot all this stuff down, there are sound scientific principles to substantiate this. The reason I'm going through all that, Bernadette, is yes, religion says, when someone's dead, that's it, end of story. But people with these abilities, the word, the messages from God did not end in the Old Testament. It did not end in the New Testament. And for the sake of our Muslim friends, it did not end with the last chapter of the Quran either. God talks to all of us. And spirit communication and God, the divine power you want to call God, is the ultimate spirit. And we are capable of perceiving and communicating with our loved ones who have left their physical bodies and transitioned to what I call the afterlife frequency.
You were telling me in the beginning, before we came on, I was asking you about Aunt Marjorie, because my experience with opening up also happened to be from a great aunt. So I was intrigued, but I would love to hear a little bit about her, and also because I know you're going to get to the part of the energy and what this energy is that is surrounding.
My father, both my parents, as I explained, had mediumistic abilities. And my mother's family, they were Italian, they were Roman Catholic, and the Italians looked at this as a gift from God. They were very, and we could spend all day talking about the prominent psychics on that side of the family. My dad had 4 siblings, 3 sisters and a brother. And one of his sisters, Marjorie, was a medium like my dad was, as was their mother, Isabel, and their maternal grandmother, Grace. So that family was loaded with psychics. And Marjorie was brilliant. She was outdoorsy. She liked riding horses. She loved reading books. Intelligent, beautiful, well-read, well-spoken woman, whom I never met in this life. And Marjorie, unfortunately for her, fell in love with a guy who was essentially a religious fanatic, and his conservative Christian views. That side of the family was not Catholic; they were Baptists from Pennsylvania. And I'm not crashing on the Baptists, okay? I mean, I'm not crashing on anybody, but he was an extremist, and one day he was getting ready to go to work. He worked at a steel factory in Pennsylvania. I believe it was in Harrison, Pennsylvania. And that day, Marjorie had a very bad feeling. She was getting this angst in her stomach, in the area of her solar plexus, which is one of the receptor areas. We have 2 main receptor areas for psychic ability in our body. One is the solar plexus, which is the second most complex bundle of nerves outside of the cerebral cortex. And that's where we get those gut feelings. Ergo, that's why they call it that. She begged him not to go to work. They had a big argument. He said, fine, fine, you and that voodoo stuff of yours. And he stayed home. Well, he was a machinist. And that day, a crane was lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams. And all of a sudden, the cable on the crane snapped and the steel beams crushed the machine shop that he worked in and killed everyone in it. If he had been there, he too would probably 99% chance have been killed. So, Bernadette, you would think he would be grateful for her gift. Instead, he feared it even more, and he conspired with an unscrupulous psychiatrist who diagnosed her as a paranoid schizophrenic. And literally, they sent an ambulance to her home, and these guys in white jackets came out. They forcibly removed her from her house, put her in a straitjacket, took her to a mental institution where she was subjected to electroshock therapy for over 6 months. And they did so much damage to Marjorie's brain. My dad said that she never again talked about future events, never again spoke about spirits. And I never met Aunt Marjorie, but once I went public with my abilities, she started coming to me. And she, like, especially when things are really kind of scary or horrific, Marjorie shows up. And as I explain, and I'm not going to give away the story, in the Afterlife Frequency, Marjorie will show up and guide me out of it. So I'm very thankful for her. And she communicates with me because I have the freedom to do something she couldn't.
Yeah.
And think about it, Bernadette. When we were kids, psychics were, we've always been around, but it was kind of looked at as a fringe thing. And it's like, yeah, and all that. But people have always believed in this for thousands of years. And nowadays there's shows like this. And there's TV shows. I've been on a number of TV shows in my capacity as a psychic medium. I do a live stream show every Thursday. The Psychic Doc and my co-host, she's a psychologist, Dr. Pat Basili. People call in and we do, I will do readings for them. And Dr. Pat uses her gift. She's an amazing psychologist to help people understand what the message is and to find healing. And so we've come out of the closet, so to speak, and we are pretty well accepted. I mean, there's always going to be people who are hostile to what we're doing, but that's the nature. That's human nature.
Well, I have a little bit of a segue to get into the, it is so true, because certainly coming from a Catholic family, I'm one of 8 children. There aren't a lot of people, and not a lot of my family members, that are really paying a lot of attention to me now that I'm kind of out of the closet. But my great aunt, during my difficulty, when my husband was passing away from alcoholism, she came. I'd been using the rosary as a way of keeping myself calm, and she came to me as a visitation. And said to me, because I was imagining my ancestors, I did a lot of ancestral work, imagining my ancestors sitting around a table. And she came to me and said, "We hear your prayers." Wow. And then I woke up. And then a few weeks later, I had a great grandmother come to me and channel the rosary through me so that I was saying it in an Irish brogue. And as I have opened up and I work with a lot of people that are going through the grieving process. That's kind of where the connection is, and trying to get them to understand that we can look to this side. We can look to our loved ones that have passed, and trying to explain to them that there is this way, there's energy that can help us. And, that's one of the, again, I sound like I'm, selling the book, but it is, the book, The Afterlife Frequency, gets into that to help people who need that more scientific explanation in order to take that step to start believing.
That's a very good point. For centuries, science and faith have been diametrically opposed. I mean, think of like a boxing ring. In this corner, we have faith. In this corner, we have science, and the people of faith are saying to the people of science, you're heretics, you unbelievers. And then the scientists, oh, it's a bunch of hocus pocus. Well, with the advent of quantum physics and in Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity and understanding frequency, and now the theories of multiverses, it appears that the people of faith and science have been saying the same things, but through different vernacular. And now, and a lot of the quantum theorists, Einstein and Werner Heisenberg, Max Planck, they would say things like, well, there's got to be a God, there's got to be some type of creator and intelligent design. And my electromagnetic soul theory, for thousands of years, every great spiritual teacher, from sages of ancient India through Zoroaster, through Moses, through Jesus, through Buddha, through Confucius, Lao Tzu, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Native American spirituality, have taught us that the soul, the spirit, the who and what we are, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and moves on after the body dies. I mean, that's what we're taught. That our, God created souls. Souls come in. The body didn't create the soul; it merely hosts it, and then we move on. Well, the law of thermodynamics and physics teaches us that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. We know the brain has an electromagnetic field, which can be quantified and measured. And so we know in science that everything's made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn are made of the smallest particle, which is a quantum, and that's pure electromagnetic energy. Now, of course, there's hadrons and the Higgs boson particle and all that, but the smallest particle is a quantum, and it's pure electromagnetic energy. So what does that mean? What that means is that everything in the material universe is at the subatomic level made of the same form of energy. You, me, the microphones we're speaking into, the radio waves that this show's being broadcast on, the light of the sun, the rings of Saturn, and beyond are all at the subatomic level made of the same form of electromagnetic energy. Now, the reason we're alive is we vibrate subatomically at a different frequency than let's say this pen. This pen not vibrating at the same level that you are. All right. So what do we hear from people who have near-death experiences? We're all interconnected. What did Jesus tell us? We're all brothers and sisters. What did Buddha tell us? We're all a stream of energy interconnected. Let me tell you something. Faith and science have been saying the same things, but now that we have quantum physics, and that's how I developed the electromagnetic soul theory, is a combining, bridging the gap of faith and science, that what we really are is not this body or these bodies, but rather consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. And that our EMS, electromagnetic soul, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, hosted by the brain. And then when the body / brain dies, it moves on and it stays coherent, which is why people like you and me can talk to our loved ones and other people's loved ones in spirit.
Yes, that is a great way to explain it. That getting down to the real science part of it. So many people need that, and then pulling people back and saying the application is you can talk with those who have crossed over and that they're with us and around us all the time.
Well, this is a good time of year to have this particular show because for a lot of people, for our friends of the Jewish faith, it's Passover. For Christians, it's Easter. And springtime has always been symbolic of the renewal and the regeneration and the eternal nature of life. And, since ancient times, there would be summer, which is a time of plenty. Then you'd go into autumn when leaves would fall. Then there's winter, which is associated with death, but then spring is rebirth. And so this is a really wonderful time to be discussing this particular topic.
So when you first, I'm going to ask this just because, a lot of people listening, are thinking, well, how do I connect with or what does it look like when I connect with my loved one? How did Marjorie first show up? Do you remember how she first showed up?
I just saw her. And I remember I said to my father, and he was still alive then. He was in his declining years. But I said, there's this woman, and I go, you remember that actress, Katharine Hepburn? And I get kind of this hair like this and a white blouse, but a real thin waist and a skirt and kind of outdoorsy. He goes, oh, geez, that's Marge. He goes, that's what she looked like. She kind of had that Katharine Hepburn look. She always wore like a crisp white blouse and a skirt. I mean, she was very ladylike, but she loved to horseback ride and be outside. And then my older sister, who knew Marjorie when she was a very little girl, I said, she's holding up this book and it's a blue cover with a moon on it. And my sister's jaw dropped. She goes, hold on. And she started digging around in some trunk and she goes, is it this book? And I'm like, and apparently Marjorie had given my sister a Child's Garden of Verses, which it's a blue cover with a crescent moon and a little boy on the cover. I mean, I described it, exactly. And that's what spirits will do. They'll come through and give us identifiers, things like that. I mean, I had no idea my sister had this book. I never saw it. It was packed away in a trunk somewhere, but she remembered that book. And my dad certainly remembered it. And so Marjorie started coming through and she became someone I really feel honored to now know.
Yes. Well, it is, as I said, when I was going through, my husband and he had a beautiful soul, but alcoholism is a horrible disease. And so I actually heard, and this, you'll probably appreciate this. You've probably heard of the medium, John Edward.
Yeah, I know John.
He's an East Coast guy. I saw a group thing with him and he talked about how he used the rosary as a meditation. And I'm like, all right. And how it helped him because, the beads are tactile. Which is why beads are used in many different religious modalities. Yeah. But that is how we're talking about energy. That was what it began for me, was I began saying the rosary, and you have to say it, Catholics say it in an audible voice. So it was the beads and the audible voice, which is kind of like a mantra, that I think created this energy that allowed that, I heard you say, or I read it in the book, about how you raise up so they can come down. Like one goes up so the other can come down. And I feel like when Sister Lou, my great aunt, who showed up in her habit, when she came to me, that's where it was coming from. And again, when my great-great-grandmother Annie from Ireland, when she came through, that it was this energy of the saying the rosary that brought them down. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. In many belief systems, Muslims use prayer beads, Hindus use prayer beads. I believe some Buddhist sects use them. The Beatle George Harrison, he wrote that song, My Sweet Lord, and part of it was Hare Krishna, my sweet Lord, Hare Krishna. Well, that was a mantra. That was a Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna. And what it is, Rama is the Hindi word for God. And Krishna is an avatar. Krishna came into human life. It's interesting. When you study Hinduism, and you see the stories of Krishna as a young child. And when he was 12, he went into the temple and started impressing all of the theologians with his great knowledge, which parallels the story of a 12-year-old Jesus going into the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem and doing the very same thing. And what the Hindus and the Buddhists and Muslims believe is that repetition, it puts you into a meditative state. And so when you pray, whatever prayers you're praying, when you're praying, you're generating this beautiful frequency. There's something really fascinating that I have I've noticed, and there is a particular sound that appears to flow through every belief system. In Christianity, it's either amen or amen. Amen. The ancient Egyptians, the king of their gods was Amun. In Hindu and Buddhism, it's Aum. Then there's in Asia, Aho. Look in the Pacific, Aloha. There's the same sound, the same resonance. And I was talking to Dr. Eben Alexander, very famous near-death experiencer, and he talked about hearing this sound in his near-death experience, and other NDEers, near-death experiencers, have reported the same phenomenon. So you wonder, is that the God frequency? Because isn't it interesting, through all these cultures, they have a very similar sound, which is associated with the divine power, the divine power of God.
Well, and we could do this next topic for a whole show, but I love going back. I have a very strong interest in ancient civilizations, and I love listening to you talk about this and seeing how there were different continents away. There was no way that this was shared information, and that it shows up in religious symbols that we now all adopt, that are shown in many different places. And it just this simple idea of the way that it's been presented about how we have come into existence is something that I'm so glad that there are so many scientists who are interested in quantum physics are studying, because it's opening our eyes to the real story, or a bigger story about who we are and how we came to be. So it is it's amazing. And getting back, I love, because what I try and do is help people to, when somebody's grieving, to help them understand that even the little signs that they get are part of an energetic system. That and like when my sister passed away, and my other sister is not a believer in this, but I kind of got her to settle into saying, okay, she's a butterfly. And on our phones, the butterfly shows up as a blue butterfly. So, so we had this conversation. I left, went to the grocery store, and there, as I'm making a turn, is this huge ceramic blue butterfly that clearly had been there the whole time that I'd lived there, but was partially hidden by a tree. And what I try and explain is that Maureen, was able, with her energetic being, was able to get me to turn, to look at that, to notice that. And that as people begin on the bottom floor, wanting to make this connection, that to understand how signs can be sent to them.
I refer to that phenomenon as a frequency beacon. And the way I describe it is, think of everyone that you love, both here on planet Earth and in spirit. You're connected through a three-dimensional spider web. Okay, let's take the spider out of it, because a lot of people are freaked out. Yeah. But spider webs, talk about a complex piece of architecture. Yeah. And how do spider webs work? Vibration and frequency, because the spider creates a web, something hits it, and it sends a vibration along there, which alerts the spider, aha, there's something in the web. Well, energetically, that's what happens with us. Like parents who suddenly feel something's wrong with their child here in this world. What, you think that's just a fluke? Okay, the
Mhm.
parents all have that. Um, what about when you're driving in your car and suddenly you feel motivated to turn on the radio and
Mhm.
there's that song?
Right.
Okay. Well, interestingly enough, radio waves are also a form of electromagnetic energy. So, what happens is spirits, being electromagnetic souls, let's say you're grieving somebody very heavily, you're sending out that vibration, it draws them to you. That's why you may feel the presence of someone. Or
Mhm.
they can direct your attention to something like a butterfly. And as soon as you see that butterfly, you think of that person because they're also sending you an EM impulse into your head saying, I'm around. So
Yeah.
the chapter in the Afterlife Frequency is the two-way street of frequency beacons, because you can
Nice.
send them to spirits, they can send that to you. Prayer is also a frequency beacon. You pray
Mhm.
for people. I always tell folks, don't pray to your loved
Mhm.
ones and spirits. You pray to the divine. You pray to
Mhm.
however you perceive God. You can pray
Yeah.
for people in spirit. I think it's better to pray for people here on planet Earth, because spirits
Mhm.
are, as you know, they always come through. They're always happy. They're fine.
There's
Yeah, we're the ones that are suffering and miserable. We're the ones that need the prayers. Um,
Mhm.
and, and that's once again what I call a frequency beacon.
Yeah. And it was, and it's interesting when my great grandmother, so when this channeling came through me, again, I was using this to settle myself to go to sleep, because anybody that has addiction in their family, that it's very chaotic and it's uncertain and there's just not a lot. So this was one of the things that I was just doing, like, so I could settle my brain. And this, a few nights after, I mean, a few weeks or so after Sister Lou had come to me, I started, all of a sudden I was saying the rosary. I started saying it in an Irish brogue. And it was so clearly,
Sure.
it was strong. It was a certain cadence. It was not me trying. I couldn't use an Irish brogue now if you asked me, but they came in an Irish, she came in an Irish brogue, and I just let it go. I went to sleep. I got up the next morning and I had the ancestral tree, and I looked and I felt her energy come to me. And I knew who it was. And it was my great grandmother, who was born in 1834 in Ireland. But the amazing thing was, so I knew that, again, that was an energetic connection. She came back every time I said the rosary, as a way of helping me get through what I was going through. And I think one of the things that, teaching people how to connect with spirit is to have them understand our loved ones are there to help us get through this lifetime, to get through what we're going through. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, if people say, well, why do spirits want to communicate with us? Because they love us. I mean, if I was in spirit, and one day I will be, I'm going to be aware of people here that I love, and if I can help direct them to avoid a collision in their car or avoid making some type of error. But people need to realize that messages from spirits are all about love, healing, resolution, and protection. Spiritual messages, including direct connect to El Numero Uno, God, are never about anger,
No.
bigotry, hatred, or violence. And when you get religious fanatics, extremists in various religions who commit acts of terror and murder, and they say this is a holy war, all I can say, as I like to quote Mother Teresa, who's now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who said, how can any war be holy?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing. Are there other things in the afterlife frequency that can help people? What is it? Is there other things besides learning more about the quantum physics and the understanding of the energy field?
Well, first off, I want to let everyone know that reading my books are not like reading an algebra textbook. I do talk about science, but I illustrate things with fast moving and poignant stories because
Yes.
I suffered through enough boring books in the practice of law. I promise
Yes.
I will not inflict that upon anyone. Yes, there is the theoretical and the scientific to help explain things, but then there are the practical lessons as well. And one of those is the RAFT technique, RAFT, how to recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking it, and trusting in the message. And the RAFT technique helps. I've gotten so much positive feedback from people that I started using the RAFT technique, and oh my God, I didn't realize how many signs from my loved ones were coming through to me. So the RAFT technique is very helpful. In fact, next week I'm going to be on. It's excuse me. Let me see. Actually, it'll be the day that this show um, is airing. At 8 p.m., I'm going to be doing an event for Helping Parents Heal.
Oh,
And Helping Parents Heal is a beautiful organization for parents
wonderful.
who have sustained the worst loss of all, which is the loss of a child. And I'm going to be explaining the RAFT technique and how you can perceive spirits. And then
Hmm.
I'm gonna have a little bit of theory, a little bit of practical lessons, and then what I believe is an uplifting story. And if we have time, I'll be doing readings for audience members as well.
Yeah. And, my awakening has gone beyond just my ancestors and loved ones who I do connect with. And it didn't happen right away, but I began to connect with a guide. And, I had been wanting more. Once you begin this journey, it's kind of like an itch you can't scratch. And you just get this wanting to just keep learning more. And as you talked a little bit earlier about, we grew up in the do not try and attempt to connect with spirit. You do not use the Ouija board. Something bad's going to happen. That was the message that we got, that I got as a child. Like, do not. And I started, I used a pendulum just for a short little while, but I made this connection. And I began to develop this relationship with a guide who is with me. And so as we begin to just open the window, and that's usually what I try and tell people, is open that window just a little bit. Just, even if you have a deep faith in a religion that doesn't necessarily believe in this, but if you're willing to just open and let a little of that air go in and out, that you can begin to realize that we can add this to our religious beliefs and begin to open up and understand more. That's
Yes.
kind of yeah.
Well, our religion, Christianity and Judaism is loaded with people with psychic and mediumistic abilities.
Yeah.
People say, don't engage in prophecy. Prophecy's terrible. But then the Pharaoh of Egypt in the book of Genesis is having a disturbing dream where 7 hefty cows emerge from the Nile River only to be devoured by 7 skinny cows, followed by 7 healthy ears of corn, then in turn devoured by 7 skinny ears of corn. And this is a reoccurring and disturbing dream. And his court, his advisors, the priests of the Egyptian religion could not interpret it. But then somebody at court knew of the Hebrew in Pharaoh's prison, Joseph, who could interpret dreams, and brought him before Pharaoh. And Joseph said, there will be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Now, Joseph is one of the heroes of the Old Testament because Joseph then was able to admit the Hebrews into Egypt. And of course, they left, with Exodus and the evil, Yul Brynner
Yeah.
Pharaoh, most likely Ramesses II. But the thing is, okay, Joseph was foretelling interpreting a prophetic dream and foreseeing future events. Then later on in the Old Testament, you have King Saul. King Saul, the first anointed king of the Jewish people. And things are not going well for Saul. His most favored advisor, the prophet Samuel, has died. The Philistines are moving against him. David is becoming extremely popular. So he consults with the witch of Endor, who is a medium, and she brings forth the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who tells Saul, your time is at an end. And so after that, Saul is defeated, his sons are killed in battle, and then he dies by his own hand. And so this is where we get a bad rap in the Old Testament, because the rabbis of ancient Judea said, see what happens when you talk to those people. Don't talk to those people. But what happened there was Samuel's spirit did not curse Saul. The spirit of Samuel, and I explain in the Afterlife Frequency how an electromagnetic soul can perceive future events, was letting Saul know that his time was at an end, because then David became the king of Judea. And in the New Testament, according to Scripture, Jesus is a descendant of the house of David. So Saul had to go for David to become king and set forth a lineage that culminated in Jesus. So how is prophecy a bad thing? And then Jesus, by the time the cock crows twice, you'll have denied even knowing me 3 times. I mean, we can go through the entire Bible. It is loaded with people. And see, when we're the good guys, we're prophets and prophetesses. When they want to make us bad, we're witches and mediums. But the thing is, the abilities are there. And then after the Bible, you've got Catholic saints, and we were talking about those earlier. So the thing is, the reason religions are down on this, God exists in spite of religion, not because of religion. Religions are a business. You can only get to God through us. You have to give us 10% of your income. You can only get to God through our dogma and our clerics. And if you don't do that, you're evil and you're going to go to hell. Okay. And that's the way it's been set up. Whereas all the great teachers tell you, you just need a direct connect to the divine.
It's coming through us. It comes through us.
Now, I just want to say, and for those of you who are members of religions, I'm not crashing on the faith or the spirituality. If you feel, and in your heart, you feel that being a member of a religion helps you and assists you in that direct connect, absolutely do this. Because if, as Pope John Paul II once said, he said, everyone should just follow the teachings of their religions. Now think about it. If everyone followed the teachings of the religions don't tell you to go kill your neighbor and attack and destroy. All religions are about peace and love and understanding.
Exactly.
It's ego-driven politicians and fanatics who use religion as a moral justification for everything which is not about spirituality.
And I agree, because religion, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic, but there are things about Catholicism or about my spiritual beliefs that came from that, and so, and I still hold some of that very dearly. But as usual, the time goes so fast. So I would love to ask you, Mark, is there anything else you'd love to share about the Afterlife Frequency, or where can people connect and see where you're going to be the next time, or where they could get a chance to, maybe have a session with you, or whatever you have that they could offer them?
Well, thank you, Bernadette. Well, my website, afterlifefrequency.com. I invite everyone to go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. You can also find about booking a session with me. This week, I'm going to have 2 online light circles. They're conducted by Zoom. Each light circle is limited to 6 attendees. That way, everybody gets a connection with their loved ones in spirit. And light circles, there's a synergistic effect, because what you'll see is messages for other people are going to start relating to you. And there's a synergistic spiritual effect, which is just amazing. And you can find out about those on my website. You'll see them in the calendar of events every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and all times in between and on either side is my live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc. And people can call in and they can, I will do a reading for them. And Dr. Pat Basili, my amazing, wonderful, can't say enough good things about her co-host. She helps people understand what the meaning of the spiritual message. It's a very healing show. We started doing this during the pandemic. And I had been on the Dr. Pat show, which she does every day. And she's been doing the Dr. Pat show, and she founded Transformation Network 20 years ago. And we did a show where I was in studio and we literally talked somebody off the ledge. Somebody was going to. And after the show, we thought we got to do something. And it resulted in The Psychic and the Doc. Also, I write for Best Holistic Life magazine, and every month I have an article in there. It's a wonderful magazine. And once again, you can find out about how to subscribe for that. You either get it online or in hard copy. So I invite everyone to visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com. Plus, both Bernadette and I will be speakers at the International Association for Near-Death Studies in Chicago in late August. And in May, I'm going to be at the New Living Expo in San Rafael, California. This is the north end of the San Francisco Bay. And I'll be presenting talk and doing spirit communication events. So I mean, I got a lot of other things, but
so that's why, Mark, to have you on the show has just been such a gift. And I know to fit it in that schedule, how you could even have done that is amazing. But I am so grateful and hope that I always say when somebody does something amazing, I hope you get an extra scoop of ice cream today. That's like that. That's kind of so we're going to end now. And thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Bernadette.